It is the classic underachiever against possibly this year's overachiever, or vice versa, when we look at Kansas State taking on UCLA in the Alamo Bowl coming up on January 1st, or actually that game's on the 2nd. Mark Rogers TV, joined by Mike WR from GoJoBruin.com. Hey, Mike, thanks so much for joining us. Let's crank it up with some UCLA talk. I kind of got my metaphors mixed up there. Actually, Kansas State, the classic underachiever, overachiever. Man, I continue to do it. The classic overachiever that gets the most out of its talent. UCLA, I don't want to call it a bad season by any stretch of the imagination at 9-3, top 15 in the country, but they were such a chic pick to get to the college football playoffs, win the Pac-12. Is Bruin Nation disappointed?
They're disappointed primarily by the fact that there's a bad taste in our mouths with that big loss to Stanford. UCLA could have clinched the Pac-12 South title and gotten a trip to the Pac-12 championship game if they would have beaten Stanford, but Stanford did the opposite and pummeled UCLA. So with that being the last game of the season, the last game the Bruins have played, there's a bad taste in our mouths. But and I think that has maybe not hampered, but it's given fans kind of a different perception of how this season was. And as you said, 9-3 is not bad. They lost big to Oregon. They had that disappointing loss to Utah. And, if they won at least one of those 3 games, they'd be in the Pac-12 championship game. But at the same time, UCLA has a young squad, and I know a lot of fans are sick and tired of hearing that, and they just want to win, which, that's the point. But I don't think that this was a disappointing season at all. I actually wrote an article for Gojo Bruin not too long ago weighing whether this was an acceptable season or successful, and it was definitely successful, but acceptable, no, because they could have had Utah in that game at that loss at the Rose Bowl. They should have been ready for Stanford, and little things that plagued the Bruins early in the season really handed them that loss to Oregon. But overall, this is the 3rd year that the Bruins have won 9 games in a row. That's the first time in school history. There's something to be said about that. The coaches, there's a bit of a learning curve there, especially with a defensive coordinator, Jeff Ulbrich, who it was his first year as a defensive coordinator, so he had some growing pains too, but he pulled it around and had some really impressive games later in the season against Arizona, against Washington, against USC, but that Stanford game stumped everybody a bit.
Yeah, exactly. So the situation is when a coach like Jim Mora takes over a program that's down and out, kind of marginal, not necessarily down and out, the improvement is substantial the first couple of years, because you can go from 5 wins to 8 wins or 9 wins or whatever. You're going to see substantial improvement if you're a bottom dweller or something close to that. Whereas you're at a point as a top 15 program over the past 2 years that the improvement is going to be substantial, but it's going to be measured by about that much, because it's going to be the difference between beating a Utah and losing to a Utah, getting to a Pac-12 championship game, or finishing in second. So the measurement of success is going to be a very fine line from here on out, and that's a good thing, because it shows that the program's progressed and Jim Mora has high expectations, and so does Bruin Nation. So you take on a Kansas State team that is definitely not a glamour team, but at the same time, Bill Snyder has this group contending for Big 12 championships almost annually. They're a tough opponent. So does a UCLA fan base get excited for Kansas State, understanding, it doesn't have the cachet of Ohio State or Alabama or Notre Dame or somebody like that, but it's a very formidable program that will bring a pretty good football team to San Antonio.
Yeah, definitely. As I said about having a bitter taste in our mouth about the loss to Stanford, a lot of people were expecting maybe a trip to the college football playoffs, definitely a trip to the Pac-12 championship game, and if anything, at least a trip to the Fiesta Bowl, which was an outside chance when the committee was choosing the teams that fateful day that took 3 and some odd hours to figure out. But at first, it seemed like the Alamo Bowl. Oh, why would we go to the Alamo Bowl? Is this a great bowl? What do we do with this? But you look at it, you look at the competition. It's definitely a step up from last year when UCLA destroyed Virginia Tech in the Sun Bowl. This is going to be a really good team that they're going to go up against. This is going to be a battle. This isn't going to be something where the Bruins rattle off 30 points against a lesser team. This is going to be a very good game. It's the first time the Bruins have played after New Year's in over 10 years. I think it was 1999, the Rose Bowl, that game, and it's it's taken a little bit, but excitement is starting to generate. It's growing. On Twitter, on Facebook, people are getting excited. UCLA is promoting this game, and excuse me, as we get closer to it, the bowl season, you just have to get excited for bowl season. We've already seen a couple really interesting bowls. That the end of the BYU Memphis game, that shows the how can I say that, the love for football, and we definitely don't want to see the end of the football season, and then wait 8-9 months for it to start again. But this is our last chance to see our team play. It's a chance for UCLA to get 10 wins. To get a win in a significant bowl. It's not one of the top 6 bowls, but it's a very significant bowl, and it's going to get a lot of attention nationally. And like I say, Kansas State is no slouch, and they're going to come ready. Bill Snyder has just done excellent things with that team year in and year out, and I like to see the challenge of it. UCLA needs to reverse that mojo from that Stanford game and do something that sits well with them, something to catapult them into next season, showing that they had a strong finish and have basically just win.
I love your point, Mike. Anyone who thinks that bowl games are inconsequential, catch the overtime and then, of course, the after the game. Not that we're condoning that in any way. It was horrible, but just in regards to the passion and the love of the game and wanting to win very badly in a hard-fought game, and then that was the conclusion, which is not a good thing. But in regards to just seeing the passion laid out there on the field, also consider this. A UCLA, very high-profile program, plays marquee games against the likes of Stanford, USC, and others throughout the season. But there are always other games going on. So regardless of how big your game is, there are other big games going on across the country, and there are other fan bases that are watching other college football games regardless of how big the game is. You talk about a bowl game, regardless of how small a bowl game it is, it has exclusivity in regards to college football fan bases. That if you want to watch college football on January 2nd that night, you're going to watch UCLA play Kansas State, or you're not watching anybody. So there are more eyeballs on UCLA or any college football program during postseason play than at any time of year. So when people talk about why should they have any incentive or motivation, I think that's one key element right there. That's when you've got the college football world's attention during bowl season, because the games are exclusive. Let's look at Brett Hundley's performance, because I look at what I saw on the field from him this season. I was extremely impressed, of course. I look at the stat sheet. The numbers pop off the sheet at 70% passing, 21 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, great ratio. Good quarterbacks are judged for big games and pulling off the big wins and winning championships. So from a guy who watches all the games and knows UCLA back and forth, your assessment of Hundley's performance this year?
There was a lot of talk about him maybe not showing up for that Stanford game, which you might be able to say that. You also could say that maybe he just had a down game. A lot of people were looking to maybe blame him for saying that he was going to leave for the NFL, or his actual quote on the Jim Rome show was that this most likely was his last game against USC, and he said that before the Stanford game. So that would lead certain people to assume that maybe he checked out. I'm hoping that it was just a really good. I mean, it was a very good Stanford team. UCLA has had trouble with them. They've lost to them 4 times in the last 3 years. They don't match up well. At least in that game, they didn't match up well. And Stanford had their number again. They had a very, very time-consuming offense, which tired the defense. It really wore them down. And Stanford's defense just did, you know, a bang-up job against UCLA. They shut down Hundley. Hundley, I think, had 3 yards at the most running. He had a negative yardage total. So Stanford had their number. But you have to look at what Hundley's done this entire season. I mean, he broke records. Most yards, most passing touchdowns. This guy is incredible. And, I wish him well at the next level and really looked, I'm really excited to see how he does on the next level. But what I've been talking with some of my UCLA friends and writers is that I personally think Hundley's going to get up for this game. That like Stanford game just left a bad taste in everyone's mouth, and they want to finish on top. Eric Kendricks, who just got a slew of awards the last couple of weeks, the Lott Impact Trophy, the Butkus Award, second team All-American. He definitely wants to end on a high note. He's the UCLA's all-time leading tackler, so he definitely wants to send a message, and I'm sure the rest of the team does. Nobody wants to lose like that, especially how badly they lost to Stanford. So being in this high-profile bowl, a January 2nd bowl, everyone's going to have their eyes on them, as you said. Whether it's your team or not, it's college football season, and if there's a bowl game on, we're going to watch it. So UCLA is going to have a lot of people looking at them, and hopefully they realize that this is the last time this squad is going to be together, so they need to go out and do it with a bang. Hundley, I think what he needs to do, a couple times he seemed to have maybe played conservative, especially in early in the season where he didn't run as much, and we kind of saw that with Stanford, whether it was Stanford doing a good job containing him, or maybe Hundley just didn't make proper reads or quick enough decisions. But I think Hundley needs to not only pass around the ball. The Bruins do very well when they pass it to 7, 8, 9 receivers throughout the game. Unlike Kansas State, they have Tyler Lockett, who is their go-to receiver. UCLA doesn't really have a go-to receiver. They have several receivers that are have their own talents and can do special things on. When they're on the field, and that's when UCLA thrives, is when they have all those options. Also, when Hundley's running, he just can't stop him. If he can find a way to get through that the front seven of Kansas State, I think UCLA will do very well. And then you also have to factor in Paul Perkins, who is the Pac-12's leading rusher. Got a little snubbed in some of the conference voting. He got honorable mention. I think it was. Can't remember offhand. I know it wasn't first team. You'd think that the leading rusher in the conference would get a first team nod, but either way, he's a bruiser. He's just improved so much since last season, and I think UCLA is going to have a very good balanced attack, and this is going to be their game to show it.
I'm going to have to run back and check that out online to see the first and second team All Pac-12, because I'd be interested to see who placed in front of Paul Perkins. I was going to bring him up next. Jordan Payton as well with 63 receptions. You mentioned Perkins leading the Pac-12 in rushing, almost 1,400 yards. So Hundley's one of the best in the business, dual threat guy, dynamic player. Perkins has this extremely productive season. Jordan Payton leads the team in receptions, but as you mentioned, there are 4 or 5 guys that were very productive. But 10 points against Stanford, not very productive for 3 quarters or so until the game was out of hand against Oregon. Those 2 games in particular. The Arizona game may be a different sort of game because the defense was so dominant they didn't have to strike downfield. They could be pretty conservative, just control the ball, scored 17 points. So where were the breakdowns when there were breakdowns on this UCLA offensive unit?
During that Stanford game, or just in general? Or?
Just in general, because I look at the talent across the board and the productivity, but then I add up, again, 10 against Stanford, not many points until late in the ball game against Oregon. Arizona wasn't a dynamic offensive effort. Where some of the breakdowns are?
One of the big things that a lot of Bruin fans like to point to is the play calling, which I can see because you could almost predict what the next. Sorry about that. I don't know what that is. You could almost predict what the play calling would be during that Stanford game. Swing pass, run up the middle. It seemed that Stanford knew exactly what the Bruins were going to do every time they tried to get the ball out to the sidelines. When the Bruins mixed things up in the middle, started doing slants and crosses, that's when Stanford had a bit more trouble. So I think UCLA just needs to, offensive coordinator Noel Mazzoni needs to be a bit more creative, needs to be a bit more surprising, maybe pull a couple tricks out of his hat to keep Kansas State honest, and really exploit the talent that they have, because like we said, there's several good receivers. Paul Perkins and Hundley running the ball. They should be dominant in every single game. Fortunately, sometimes their play calling is a bit vanilla, and like I said with Stanford, it seemed just a little predictable. If UCLA can spread it out and do some things that maybe we haven't seen before, I think they will be in a very good position to beat Kansas State. Even the offensive line, which had a lot of trouble penalty-wise, there were a lot of young guys. They've been doing really well. They switched up some of the guards and tackles, and it seemed to fit a little bit more in the second half of the season. So I think that UCLA just has to get their focus together and come out smashing.
We're joined by Mike W.R. from GoJoBruin.com. On the flip side of the ball, Mike, this UCLA defense, there were some performances mid-season against Colorado and against Cal in particular that had me shaking my head because of superior talent on that side of the ball. But the defense really seemed to really catch fire late in the season, was dominant against USC and Arizona in particular. And even the Stanford game, I think that all the 3-and-outs and the ineptitude on offense kind of played into giving up 31 points more so than the defense playing poorly. So the defense is in great shape, it appears from my angle.
Yeah, throughout the season, UCLA was running a nickel defense. They have a lot of really talented guys in the secondary. Unfortunately, some of them got injured, like Randall Goldforth, but I read in the LA Times that apparently he should be back for the bowl game. He had 2 surgeries on both of his shoulders, and that was earlier in the season, so he might be ready to go. Pardon me. But a lot of the time, the secondary was the one that got beat up on. They were in the lower half of the statistics for the Pac-12 for most passing yards given up, and so I think they just need to tighten the screws a little bit. And this is Jeff Ulbricht's first year, so as I said previously, there are a lot of growing pains, and the same could be said for the players too, because they're learning a new system. Last year they played primarily in a 3-4 under Lou Spanos, who's now with the Tennessee Titans. But Ulbricht changed it up. They have a lot of good talent in the secondary, and I think they wanted to use that. But you also have Kendricks and Myles Jack, who are in the middle of the field, and they're holding the middle of the field down, but at the same time they can't do everything. You saw Jack was all over the field in Stanford. He's been a good pass rusher. He's been great in the open field. But during Stanford, for some reason, he can do it, but having him tail or wide receivers and play in the secondary or play in that nickel position might be stretching him a bit thin. So if they just they have their players play what they're used to, I think they should be all right. Having a very tired Myles Jack and Eric Kendricks is going to do UCLA no favors. So they need to really have the secondary lock down that passing game, because Jeff Waters and Tyler Lockett of Kansas State, they are just a dynamic duo. They're fantastic, and if they can air out the ball against UCLA, it could spell curtains for the Bruins, which is why the defensive line, who has been they've showed up in the second half of the season. A guy that UCLA picked up, he was a junior college transfer, Takros McKinley. Not as many sacks, but the pressure that he gets on the quarterback has been amazing. Eddie Vanderdoes, Kenny Clark, very big bruisers up front, and their pass rush was improved a lot better. And I think that they need to really attack Jeff Waters and get some pressure on him in the backfield. as well as stopping Tyler Lockett. Maybe force Kansas State to run the ball because they're not, they're a very good running team, and even Jeff Waters, the quarterback. He's a bit of a dual threat quarterback as well, so he can run the ball. But they really need to get pressure, from the line and really take a lot of that off of the secondary.
The bowl game's an opportunity, of course, to close out 2014 in style, win 10 games, possibly finish in the top 10, and again, look good in front of the national television audience. It's also an opportunity during these sessions of kind of quasi-spring practice and leading in to the offseason to prepare for 2015. So looking at this bowl game coming up on January 2nd, Mike, who are some of those players that you would like to see break out, have big performances as we spring ahead to 2015?
I definitely want to see a bit more from Eddie Vanderdoes. He's that guy's just a monster, and he's he's that kind of mad defensive lineman that you need and you want on your team. And I even though he's done some really excellent things, I still think he has a lot to show and a lot left in the tank. Stuff he hasn't showed us before. Takkarist McKinley, as I said, he's going to be fantastic. And he's only had about half a season with UCLA, and to do so well at this point is fantastic. So seeing him improve into next year is just going to be fantastic. On the offensive side, the O-line has been doing better. Unfortunately, we were supposed to get a guy back, Simon Goins, who just never he wasn't ready this year. So I believe he's going to come back next year and should really help that offensive line, who's just improving. And you got Caleb Benenoch and Jake Brendel, who Benenoch is a sophomore and Brendel is a junior, and I don't think Brendel is going to be going to the NFL. He hasn't made any assertion to that, but the offensive line is just going to be fantastic. And for whatever quarterback the Bruins have next year, they'll be well protected. And just seeing Paul Perkins do more, just the fact that he's a redshirt sophomore and he's just already the Pac-12 leading rusher, he should be great. But there's also a lot of young guys who are stepping up, and they have UCLA has some really good recruits coming in next year, and Jim Mora is not afraid to play true freshmen, as we've seen. Myles Jack, the biggest the example, and he's just been fantastic. And you haven't heard a lot from him this year, but he has done a lot. He's been when Kendricks has been just the guy in the right spot, holding down the linebacking, the middle of the field with the linebackers. Myles Jack has been everywhere. I said before, he's in coverage, pass rush, playing a little bit of secondary. Guy's just a beast, and going into next year, he should have a monster junior season. But overall, it's there's a lot of talent, and UCLA they just need to play their game. They just need to be comfortable, come out of the starting gate pretty quick, and just play the game that they know how to play.
Mike W.R. joins us from GojoBruin.com. Hey, Mike, we always appreciate the insight and the information. It's always a good discussion, and love hearing the UCLA football talk. I expect this to be one of the better bowl games outside the college football playoffs. Two quality football teams looking for a top 10 status in the final rankings, Kansas State, UCLA.
Yes, definitely. It's as I said, it's nothing like a game against Virginia Tech last year. So this is going to be a very good game for both teams. So.
Okay, Mike, you have a great holiday. Appreciate the time.
You too. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me again.